They will spend a lesser fraction of their revenue on physiological and safety needs and more on esteem and self-actualization needs like technology, automobiles, fashion, and so on. And precisely, the continent is betting more and more on the creativity of its citizens to showcase own pride in the fashion sector. With the rise of the demand, the continent's fashion industry is on its way to reach its full potential and secure jobs for the youth. According to the African Development Bank, the textile and clothing industry on the continent is worth around $31 billion, with brand gaining international recognition and fashion hubs like Nigeria or South Africa being more and more scrutinized. With that in mind, we wanted to dig deeper to better understand this market that is often approached as a whole and not as the combination of different cultures, histories, and influences. All of Eurytech's work lies in the subtle marriage between fashion intelligence and tech intelligence, and with our desire to always be in tune with the next cutting-edge trends of this industry throughout the world, it was crucial for us to dive into this promising market. This report will be presented to you by myself, Amélie Rodsen, fashion analyst at Eurytech, as well as Jenna McFeely, fashion curator. We will first map out the African scene and its principal hubs of creativity, and then tackle the new phases of design and creative direction with an auspicious future on the continent and internationally, and also speak about the challenging awaiting them. Leading on to the more strategic side with e-commerce opportunities in and outside of the continent, and also the influential faces to bet on for communication campaigns. And finally, we will of course present our expertise by analyzing trends spotted in various Pan-African designers' collection through our data for next spring 2022. So starting off with Africa's fashion capitals. So African fashion weeks have been traditionally held during around the month of October around the 54 country continent. Over 10 events are organized from Senegal to South Africa via Ethiopia or Tanzania. And over the last 2 decades, countries have started to implement such industry rendezvous to promote their local designers and encourage customers to buy more locally. It is important to underline this plurality of events because, as in Europe, it marks the specificity of each market, national or regional. If Africa inhabits over 1.2 billion of people, 60% of the world population, right after Asia with 60%, therefore, it would be misleading to speak of African fashion as something global and homogeneous that would be defined by the same codes and behaviors throughout the continent. So even the notion of an African market can be delusive. The 54 countries share trading and legal conventions according to regional strategies, but are not economically integrated as the European Union, for example. Still, all those fashion weeks have the common objective to highlight fashion talents and conceptualize the African creative potential in a post-colonial era. Many of them come up with a Made in Africa focus like the Swahili Fashion Week or the SA Fashion Week. So talking about the top cities among all the different fashion weeks organized throughout the continent, there are 3 main ones that have really caught on the international attention. Firstly, the SA Fashion Week, which is also the oldest one, launched in 1997 by Lucilla Boysen. It was the first seasonal event and has through the years become less centered around occasional wear and more on emerging designers. Then in 2022, Adama Ndiaye, founder of the brand Adama Paris and the concept store Sargal in Paris, launched the Dakar Fashion Week. It came to her as a response to the lack of opportunity she had as a designer in Paris. She then created the Black Fashion Week to help also Pan-African designer to present collections in Paris. And she's still working on new project to foster the Made in Africa on both sides of the Mediterranean Sea. And finally, in 2008, the Lagos Fashion Week took light, produced by the agency Style House Files. It comes as no surprise that 2 of those fashion weeks are held in Africa's most powerful countries, so South Africa and Nigeria, since they benefit from international exposure and government fundings. Yet, with COVID, all three of them have had to push digital coverage more and more and have taken the question of sustainability head on. So to present a bit the new vanguard, so in recent years, renowned global luxury platforms have taken interest in new African talents and offered them serious outlets, a necessary step for the commercial expansion of those brands on an international level. Over the last 2 years, the LVMH Prize has looked into the continent to find new talents to promote. The South African Tebe Magugu was the winner of the 2019 edition, while Kenesize was one of the finalists. Last year, due to the pandemic, the 8 finalists were awarded, among them the Nigerian Indian Priyal Walia and the South African Cindy Sokumalo. This year too, the Cape Town-based Lucanium Dinghy and the Caribbean Bianca Sanders all shortlisted for the prize. Last year, the major European fashion capitals that are Paris, Milan, and London also highlighted African creativity. In Paris, notably, the South African Tebe Magugu and Kenesize from Nigeria have been scheduled for a few seasons now, on the Paris Fashion Week calendar, while Virgil Abloh, the American Ghanaian founder of Off-White and current artistic director of Louis Vuitton's menswear, paid homage to his Ghanaian roots during the French Maison last show. Iman Ayissi, a Cameroonian designer that has been operating in France for over 30 years now, was the first sub-Saharan designer to be scheduled in a prestigious calendar of Paris Haute Couture in January 2020. Far from the cliché and the expected wax fabric, it strives to showcase the plurality of the continent's know-how. For the young brands operating on the continent, its storytelling is at the heart of their DNA. Through reflections on national or ethnical heritage, gender fluidity, sexuality, spirituality, or colonialism, they forge a rich universe around their creation. Those creative minds have traveled, studied abroad, or may have mixed origins and are not only nourished by their local environment, but are true global thinkers. So this sense of community is also reflected in their approach to sustainability. Brands like Mr. Maxwell from South Africa, Lem Lem from Ethiopia, Christy Brown, or even Paris-based Ongoro and Iman Ayissi have underlined the effort put on Made in Africa and the valorization of local artisans and raw materials. Like for instance, Mohair, for which South Africa takes the lead on its global production. Tebe Magugu and Kenesize and the French Moroccan Tachar Giref from Casablanca were nominated for this year's edition of the International Woolmark Prize, centered around responsible production and craftsmanship. Moreover, upcycling is a cherished outlet for brands like Ahluwalia or Lagos Space Program, since it allows them to enrich their storytelling with historicity. Still, there are, for those continental designers, a major restraint on their ability to scale. Most African countries don't have the financial resources or value chain to really provide those designers support over time. And sometimes they are inevitably tempted to go outside of the continent to produce. In a Both Voices panel about Africa's place in the future of fashion, Omoyemi Akerele, that you can see on the right, founder of the creative agency Stylist Files and regarded as a driving force behind Nigeria's burgeoning fashion industry, explained this a little further. China has for many years positioned itself on Africa's path to industrialization in several sectors, and fashion is not left behind, with companies and NGOs like Made in Africa initiative counseling local government on their development. Focusing on exports for big multinational companies, the manufacturing park has grown a lot over the years, creating many jobs and generating foreign revenue, but with the downside of only producing large quantities. And this is why young designers, therefore, don't meet the minimum order quantities of those big factories and have some time to go out and produce in Turkey or India. For Akerele, the solution to this lies in the regional integration of the value chain, and she says, I quote, The continent is vast in human resources. We have values, we have skills that's been passed down from generation to generation. So when you think of African fashion, you think of craftsmanship, of artisans dotting in communities, not only localized in one region. So the vision is to be able to tap into that pool of creativity, tap into that pool of networks, to be able to create beautiful garments that have history, meaning, but most importantly, that creatively and economically benefit hundreds of thousands of people across the value chain. So to carry on, we will present you some new names that you should like watch out. I will start off with women's wear brands. So Rich Mincy, founded in 2015, the Eponymous brands present a distinct point of view, celebrating culture, heritage, and the common human experience. Its unique universe takes its inspiration from the arts, films, and nature to create immersive sceneries. Then Musa Maxwell, a South African brand, created by Musa Boko and Maxwell Potsane. We met in 2016 on a fashion competition TV show called The Intern, and they have since encountered astonishing success. The brand focuses on tailoring, architectural cuts, geometrical pattern, and strive to create sustainable clothing through the usage of natural and high quality fibers. And lastly, for women's wear, Anifa, which is USA based but created by the Congolese Anifa Mwemba. If the brand is not that new since it has been created in 2012, it gained visibility during the pandemic. In May 2020, she presented a 3D rendered fashion show where curvaceous ghost models were threading down a digital catwalk. The response of this trailblazing show was immediate, with increasing sales and media coverage. And now I will let Jenna take on the lead with menswear brands.
Great. So the first menswear brand we have is Aluwalia. So while traveling in her parents' respective countries of Nigeria and India, Priya Aluwalia, who is born in London, took unwanted garments from Western countries and gave them a second life. Her sustainable collections are made from dead stock, which earned her a feature in the Gucci Fest recently, and she's now launched a female collection in collaboration with the Danish brand Gani. The next new name we have is Olu. The brand was founded in 2018 by the photographer Kader Diaby, known for his poetic universe. Inspired by the Malinke culture, it takes as a starting point its loose outfits and earthy colors to tell the story of a 21st century Abijanese nourished by references gleaned around the world. And lastly, we have Lagos Space Program. It was the brand was founded by Adeju Thompson as a gender-neutral label with a main focus on an ethical movement based on craftsmanship, mixing both Japanese and African inspiration. And now we'll move on to art direction to explore the creative universe of African designers. So of course, fashion and luxury consumption is not just about design and craftsmanship. La part de rêve, or the dream share, plays a big part in one's willingness to relate to and buy from a brand. For a long time, Africa's narrative was portrayed through Western imagery as being limited to tribal fashion and wax fabric and far from the Western vision of sophistication. Now, African creatives are regaining control over this narrative by tapping into the richness of their cultural heritage to propose a newly striking and sophisticated vision, and it's working. Major Western fashion media like Vogue, L'Officiel, ID, or WWD are finally giving more and more attention to the African fashion scene at large, giving it the spotlight it deserves. For instance, take Lejenki, the renowned Ivorian Senegalese stylist who has worked with the likes of Beyonce, Kanye West, and Naomi Campbell for major Western publications like Vogue. He's played an important role in promoting diversity in the industry and has helped various designers through consulting. Kusi Kubi is another important figure in the realm of African fashion. He's a creative director from Nigeria based between London and New York. He's also worked for major publications like L'Officiel Homme or King Kong Magazine for big brands like Burberry, Adidas, and Carven, just to name a few. Additionally, last October, he worked on a collaboration between Gucci, Manju, which is a celebratory platform dedicated to the work of African creatives, and a Vibe called Tech, which is a London-based creative agency that explores the intersection of Black creativity, culture, and innovation. The project was centered around the Jackie 1961 bag that was conceived as an ode to the Ghanaian youth. We also have Ibrahim Kamara, who arrived in London at age 16 and was recently named the editor-in-chief of Dazed magazine after making a name for himself working on commercial and creative projects for major names like Stella McCartney and Dior. Lastly, it's important to mention the rising prominence of African photographers, with figures like Stephen Tayu and Yves Sambu offering imageries as diverse as the continent and snubbing obsolete stereotypes. Now we'll move on to the role of luxury e-tailers in the African fashion landscape. So even with obstacles like low internet penetration or logistical challenges, Africa has still experienced some major success stories in the realm of e-commerce over the last decade. However, concerning luxury products, it can still be difficult for wealthy African consumers to find coveted luxury goods since many brands are not well established across the continent, or their stock might be very limited with high import duties and taxes. This is why some African consumers choose to have a relative who lives in Europe or the US to purchase luxury items for them and send it to them. Farfetch, however, is a kind of unicorn. They ship to 45 out of 54 countries with nominal shipping fees, while Net-a-Porter has limited itself to only 20 destinations in Africa. For continental designers, it may have been hard to get attention from international buyers, but for a couple of years now, qualitative e-commerce platforms have started to tackle this valuable pool of talent. In 2017, the New Yorker Amira Rasool launched The Folklore, where she carries Black-owned and Africa-based brands. Her aim was to offer underestimated talents a curated presence online and give them the ability to reach the diaspora, especially in the USA. She has now extended the delivery to almost every country. The next year in Tanzania, the website Industry Africa came to life with an equal will to question the standpoint on African creativity. If the platform initially started as a glossary for brands, now almost 40 brands from 20 different African countries are available for purchase. Founded by Nisha Kanabar, the site has kept its editorial DNA reporting on upcoming designers, sustainability, or continental fashion weeks. Finally, the latest platform is called Jendaya, and it's still in the pilot phase. However, it is slated to launch in July. Just like Industry Africa and The Folklore, it already proposes qualitative editorial content centered around sociological issues, Black fashion history, but also Western fashion weeks. The commercial part of the platform will carry African designers as well as Western brands like Prada, Givenchy, or Marine Serre, and beauty products for both men and women. The initiative will certainly ease African consumers' access to international luxury and will also be available for consumers outside of the continent. Jendaya is also planning to unveil exclusive collaborations and capsule collections, as well as a personalized styling service. And now we'll delve into some of the influential faces defining the African market. So to enter the African market, it is very important for international brands to really understand the specificity of the markets and have teams directly on the field. This is especially true for influencer communication. Celebrity marketing is a good way to start with different fields to tap into, with Nollywood, which is the African version of Bollywood, giving rise to several major African influencers, including the actresses Adesua Etomi, who's pictured in orange, or Genevieve Naji, who have both gathered millions of followers. We also have TV personalities like the South African Bonang Matiba or Minnie Diamini, who are also massively followed and showcase a very trendy style, mixing household luxury names as well as traditional African garments. The music field has also experienced a global boom over the past few years, with artists such as Burna Boy or WizKid's music videos having hundreds of millions of views, attracting international attention. And while the link between film, music, and fashion does not need to be proven anymore, these artists' global audience and edgy style makes them ideal representatives for African and international designers who are hoping to attract aspirational or entry-level consumers. For luxury consumers, the Nigerian PR firm Redrick advises to bet on high net worth individuals like the writer Chimamanda Adichie, who inspired Maria Grazia Chiuri's first collection for Dior with her book called We Should All Be Feminists, released in 2014. There's also the influencer market with entrepreneur women and travel enthusiasts like Boiti Tulo, who showcases the lavish side of Africa, which is aspirational to say the least. Picking the right brand ambassador requires foreign brands to do exhaustive research on the market, along with the influential figures of a particular country or field. And lastly, it's important to consider the weight of the diaspora. As a result of colonization, people of African descent are present throughout the world with their heart and their wallet lying between the Western world and their roots, and this will to consume Black has been reinforced. Take, for example, the Nigerian American Jackie Aina, who is currently the most followed Black influencer, or the Ethiopian Naima Teng, who's based in LA, with both of these figures being beauty gurus having inspiring success stories. And finally, there's the promise of Afro cyber influencers who might be a new fun outlet, given the success encountered by Lil Miquela, who is another virtual influencer. For example, there's a self-proclaimed Creole doll at Ivani, who only has 10,000 followers on Instagram at the moment, but has already partnered with Beyonce for her latest Ivy Park drop. And now I'll leave it to Emily to introduce the trends.
Thank you, Dina. So before presenting you the trend, I will present you a bit our methodology, so how we work. So for this trend report, we worked on a panel of Pan-African designers taking collection, not firstly like the latest collection, but at least the two previous collection, because with the pandemic, it allowed us to have a more broader sense of what they did. As for data source, we work with Instagram posts in Europe, especially because we don't have like a fully developed market for Africa yet, or for some countries of Africa. And also because we thought that it would be maybe interesting for buyers from France or European countries to see the potential of those brands in a European market. So we will forecast for spring 22, comparing to spring 2021. Sorry. So the metrics you will see, we have first the trend cluster that is based on the growth and the magnitude metrics. So we have 6 types of clusters going from the most effective, the fashion bet. We have a big visibility, so big magnitude, and a growing dynamics. And then markdown, which is the least interesting, or the one that should not be carried over in a collection, that has a decreasing dynamics and a low magnitude. So the growth rate here will compare the visibility of the trend on social media between the spring 2021 and spring 2022. The magnitude is how much the trend is visible. So we have 5 levels: micro, small, medium, and big, and massive. And finally, the consumer segmentation represents who wears the most this trend on social media. So it is edgy, trendy, or mainstream people that we see wearing this trend the most. So we will start with prints. So for prints, tie and dye, we'll start with chase. So tie and dye is a traditional technique widely spread across the continent. It's called Odire in the Yoruba culture, or Gara in Sierra Leone, and was initially using natural dyes extracted from indigo or kola nuts. Nowadays, synthetic dyes are less expensive and easier to manage, and they also allow brands to have a wider range of colors to play with. For instance, Maza Studio has made the print a staple in both its men and women's collection, and shades in tie and dye have been a really popular trend in Europe all 2020 and will continue to be a safe bet, but mostly worn by edgy consumers for spring 2022. Then we have stripes. Stripes seems to be really popular among African designers, and some like Kenneth Easy have made them their signature pattern. They are mostly thin, vertical, and colorful, as you can see, and they elongate the silhouette in a playful way. In Europe, we recognize them being quickly associated with pinstripe and two-tone patterns, which explain their steady dynamics for both men and women, and the fact that they are seen on all types of consumer segmentation. But it could definitely be an interesting twist to add to summer collections. Then a qualitative trend that we don't have that on is kente, since it's a very traditional fabric. The textile is said to have been created by mimicking the action of the spiders, but to friends who watch the spider weaves its web. It was a fabric initially made for kings and represented the harmony between Ghanaians and the Mother Nature. So the kente cloth is now one of the most famous and wanted fabric in the whole Africa, and now Iman Naisi brings this textile to Parisian culture with Virgile Abloh and Iman Naisi brings this textile to Parisian couture, while Virgile Abloh, as you can see, celebrates his roots with his last menswear show for the French powerhouse Louis Vuitton. So concerning colors, orange is a bold color that has an androgynous appeal, used on head-to-toe silhouettes. It creates statement looks, especially in fabrics like nylon or silk, that help reflect its light. The color which is said to keep its attractiveness for next spring for both men and women, is mainly adopted by mainstream masculine profiles, while females of all consumer types are drawn to it. Then we have green. So green in the Pan-African flag, red, black, and green, is supposed to represent the abundance and wealth of Africa, therefore being the color of sovereignty and unity. And here you can see that whether it is an emerald green for Elora, Anduro, Olugu, a chartreuse green for Rich Mincy and Orange Culture, or a pine green for Amy Casbit, it is never dull and always a statement piece of the look. Green has approximately the same metrics for men and women for next spring, with stable growth and massive magnitude. It is just appealing to all three consumers for women and only trendy and edgy for men. And concerning our qualitative trend for colors, so indigo dyeing is an ancient method that can be traced back to the 14th century in Africa, with dye pits dating from 700 years ago, found in Kano in northern Nigeria. It is really popular for the ease with which it transfers onto cotton, and is often embellished with raffia tied around the fabric or cassava starch to give it repetitive patterns. At the end, the fabric is coated with wax to ensure longevity. And I will let Jenna continue with fabrics.
Yes, so for our fabrics, we've just included data for women in Europe, because in Europe, these trends are mostly worn by women, but it's interesting to note that in Africa, these fabrics are worn equally by men and women. So the first one is see-through. So see-through fabrics like muslin or tulle bring a sense of romanticism and dreaminess to any look. Frank Aguno and Lizanne Vivier from Fruchet and Vivier Studios use the fabric for evening wear brands like Orange Culture and Conad, revealing a less expected use of the material with men's shirts or blazer and shorts ensemble. Being mainly worn by the trendy consumer segment, it still has a big magnitude of visibility and stable dynamics, which explains its status of safe bet. Moving on to our next fabric, we have satin, and this fabric immediately brings an elevated touch to a garment. We have designers like Anifa, Iman Aisi, or Maxi Vive, using it for the way it complements bright colors like fuchsia or orange. And when made out of regular silk, it brings movement and light to the garment, while raw silk adds structure. For Europe, the fabric remains a safe bet with a medium magnitude, and interestingly enough, it is mostly spotted on edgy consumers. And now for the next one, for our qualitative material insights, we have fringe. And fringe is a detail that brings a sense of movement and volume to a garment, with designers like Lucanio Medinghi and Imana Isi using them to create a dynamic effect. Knitted fringe was included in the first designer's latest collection and made out of raffia for Aisi's couture show. For Kenneth Easy, it became a signature detail added on the hems of their coats, pants, and dresses. And now we have patchwork or tailoring rather, sorry. And tailoring is for many designers a way to explore and experiment with new shapes and fabrics. The South Africans Muso and Maxwell have made it the DNA of their brand, but with deconstruction in mind. Whether it's through asymmetry, pleats, or lace inserts, they always deliver inspiring models of classic tailored garments. Emmy Casbett uses the hand weaving technique called akwete to create beautiful patterns while exploring shapes like cropped jackets for men or deconstructed sleeves. Lastly, we have patchwork. So it's a needlework technique that brings together miscellaneous pieces of fabric into one cohesive design. It can obviously be used for aesthetic purposes, as seen by Maxi Vive and Lisa Fulawayu. And the latter is well known for mixing colorful, traditional prints to make vibrant pieces. For Priya Aluwalia, the motivation is elsewhere. She draws inspiration from her interest in sustainability and the symbolic intersection of past, present, and future. Patchwork then becomes a technique that merges elements from the past to create something new. And lastly, we have bubu. So the agbada, also known as bubu, is a traditional garment worn by men and women across various parts of the continent with regional variations. It's generally made in bazin, wax, or bogolan, and it provides comfort, especially during periods of intense heat. Designers are playing with the garment and modernizing it. The brand Tiffany Amber offers an uber luxurious version embroidered with ostrich feathers, while others like Sarah Diouf's Tongro or Daily Paper propose an open work cotton iteration to gain even more comfort and breathability. So that concludes our trends, and now Emily will just go over some key takeaways to summarize what we just presented.
Thank you. So yeah, to sum up a bit this presentation. So first, to repeat that Africa is a land of opportunities for the fashion and luxury markets, with a rising number of millionaires and people really interesting to fashion. I think it should definitely be a land for brands to try to explore and see what they can, how they can tackle this market. Also, the narration of the African fashion cannot be done without African creatives. People are now really quick to call out a brand for cultural appropriation. So stop any narrative based on like Western imagery and try to really call those creatives to create stories that will highlight their culture the way they know how. Also, whatever your positioning is, whether you're from high luxury or mass market, there are some serious e-commerce outlets available, but you have to really be sure to look through the regional market you want to tackle. So Jenna talked about Jendaya, the folklore that are really more centered about high market, but for instance, like Jumia or Konga, which are both Nigerian, are really big e-commerce success stories. And Jumia is now, I think, spread its reach to at least 10 countries across the continent. And finally, most trends, as you may see in the last part, were considered safe bets on the European market. So even if they may be stylized in a different way, those designers could really be interesting to try on the European market. So yes, actually we didn't tell you everything. We have quite a few trends again for our clients. So if you want, you can get in touch with @InfoEuritech, and you can also subscribe to our newsletter to never miss our next report or webinars.